Hello, everyone. Please join me in Gassho. From the writings of Master Yuan Chao of the Vinaya School, was quoted by Shinran Shonin. Truly, Dharmakara, from the time of his causal stage, established his vows, held fast to his aspiration, pursued his practice to fulfillment, and embraced the benevolence to save beings for countless kalpas. There is no place at all, even so small as mustard seed, where he did not abandon his life for our sake. Practicing the 6 paramitas of compassion and wisdom, he took in all and guided all sentient beings without exception. Namo Amida Butsu, Namo Amida Butsu, Namanda, Namanda, Namanda Butsu. Sometime between January and March, in many parts of California, in the hills and fields, there comes this bright profusion of yellow mustard flowers. Supposedly brought to California by the Franciscan missionaries, the mustard plants have established themselves up and down the state. It's strange, but I never associated these plants or flowers with the spice that we consume, and even though we call them mustard. I thought it was a relative of the edible mustard, but I didn't think you could actually eat it. One of the ways that I've been entertaining myself during shelter in place is learning how to cook different cuisines, in particular Indian, Jewish, and Middle Eastern dishes. So I've become quite familiar with the mustard seed. They feature prominently in Indian cuisine, and particularly in South Indian cuisine, where they are fried in oil along with other spices such as curry leaves and added to dishes at the end of cooking. It's fun to watch these tiny little seeds sputter and pop to make what is called a chunk or a tadka. It's a similar technique to pouring hot oil over aromatics in East Asian cooking. Whenever I cook with mustard seed, I think of the story of Kisa Gotami. According to the Buddhist canon, Kisa Gotami was a poor young woman who married a wealthy man. She bore a child who died soon after. In her grief, she refused to believe the child was dead and carried it around, hoping it would be revived. A man took pity on her and suggested she see the Buddha, who might be able to help her. Kisa Gotami then went to the Buddha and asked for his help. He agreed to provide a medicine for her baby, but would need mustard seed to concoct it. And just not any mustard seed, but the seeds from a household who has never known death. Kisa Gotami goes from house to house asking for the mustard, which the people gladly give her. But when she says they must be from a house that has not known death, they apologize and tell her that they've known loss. In some cases, a parent, a child, a sibling, or a spouse. She repeats this request several times, and each time the household responds that they have known death and loss. At some point, she becomes aware of the universality of suffering and death, returns to the Buddha, and asks to be ordained and become a disciple of the Buddha. When I first heard this story, I think I imagined that Kisa Gotami had some sort of satori or instantaneous enlightenment experience, like, aha, I got it. And her sorrow miraculously ceased. Also, in my postmodern mind, I thought, how could someone believe that a common spice, such as mustard seed, could revive a dead child? I felt empathy and compassion for her predicament, but wonder if I was in her place at that time, would I have been comforted by the Buddha's methods? One of the outcomes of the pandemic is that, ironically, I am in closer contact with some friends who live across the country more than I was before the pandemic. We're on group chats, Zoom calls. We share our successes, joys, as well as losses. Many of us have family members that are facing illness. Some of us ourselves have had health concerns, and we're hearing about them in real time. Not just once a year when we get together to catch up or in a year-end greeting card. Sharing our joys and sorrows has been a great source of comfort. Thinking about this, it occurred to me that what makes the story of Kisa Gotami noteworthy is not its conclusion. It's not what happened, but how it happened. I can imagine Kisa Gotami visiting with each family and receiving care and concern. These were most likely people she knew and who knew her. Yes, she realized the truth of universal suffering, but it's only after the Buddha points her in the direction of her community. He didn't send her to a mountaintop to contemplate Buddhist doctrine. He had her share her story and hear her neighbors' stories. Receiving their compassion, she gained insight. This calls to mind the 18th chapter of the Kudensho, a collection of Shinran Shonin's sayings as recorded by his great-grandson, Kakunyo. In this chapter, Shinran Shonin instructs followers to share the Dharma with those in mourning in a plain manner. He follows that with the second instruction, not to burden mourners with more sadness. Interestingly enough, in the Kisagotami story, not everyone appreciated being reminded of their loss. In these instances, Shinran suggests sitting with the bereaved, share a drink until a smile appears on their face, and then taking their leave. Why and how certain stories remain salient within religious communities fascinates me. Which stories are retold and incorporated into the canon, which are lost, which are refound. Time, place, context are all factors. David Payton Sensei touched on this last week. For me, the Kisagotami narrative embodies our Pure Land practice, where we become aware of the compassionate activity of Amida Buddha working in our lives, encouraging us to awaken and appreciate life as it is, and not how we wish it to be. We do this within the context of community. We take refuge in the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha. I believe this is why the story of Kisagotami is retold at this time and place in our community. In the story, she encounters life just as she is in her present circumstances at the intersection of wisdom and compassion. Now, when I pass by a field of mustard flowers, I appreciate their temporal beauty, and I'm reminded by every flower head bowing in the wind of the working of wisdom and compassion in my life. And with that, I respond, Namo Amida Butsu. Please join me in Gasho. Truly, Dharmakara, from the time of his causal stage, established his vows, held fast to his aspiration, pursued his practice to fulfillment, and embraced the benevolence to save beings for countless kalpas. There is no place at all, even so small as mustard seed, where he did not abandon his life for our sake. Practicing the 6 paramitas of compassion and wisdom, he took in and guided all sentient beings without exception. Namo Amida Butsu, Namo Amida Butsu, Namanda, 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 Namanda Butsu. Thank you.